He went to buy an engagement ring. Not for love, just for power, contracts, headlines. The store was quiet, glass shining, diamonds burning under white light. Then he looked up. His ex-wife was standing behind the counter. The woman he divorced when he chose money over her. The woman who disappeared without a word. The woman he still saw in his dreams. Their eyes met. Her hand shook, but she didn't look away. "Which ring?" she asked coldly, like he was a stranger. He forgot how to breathe. The ring he came for suddenly felt like a lie. The diamond counterpart won. The return. The sleek black Mercedes glided through the streets of Gangnam, its tinted windows reflecting the neon-lit storefronts and designer boutiques that lined Seoul's most affluent district. In the back seat, Kim Jae-won sat with his phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight with concentration, as he negotiated yet another multi-million-dollar deal. At 42, he was one of South Korea's youngest self-made billionaires, having built his tech empire from nothing more than a cramped studio apartment and an unshakable vision. "The terms are non-negotiable," he said in English, his tone brooking no argument. "If the board wants our investment, they'll accept our conditions. I'll give you until Friday." He ended the call without waiting for a response and slipped the phone into his pocket. Through the window, the city rushed past in a blur of light and motion, but Jae-won's mind was elsewhere. Specifically, it was on the small velvet box that would soon contain a symbol of his future, an engagement ring for Min Seo, the elegant gallery curator he'd been dating for the past 18 months. Min Seo was everything that made sense. She came from a good family, moved in the right circles, understood the demands of his lifestyle, and never asked for more than he was willing to give. She was beautiful in a refined way, always perfectly composed, her conversations limited to art, culture, and the social events that filled their calendar. She was, by all accounts, the perfect choice for a man in his position. So, why did the thought of proposing feel like signing another business contract? Jae-won pushed the uncomfortable thought aside as the car pulled up in front of Maison de Lumière, one of Seoul's most exclusive jewelry houses. The establishment was known for its discretion and its exceptional collection of rare diamonds, catering exclusively to clients who value privacy as much as quality. His assistant, Young-ho, had made the appointment weeks ago, ensuring that Jae-won would have the boutique's undivided attention. The CEO wasn't accustomed to browsing. He was accustomed to acquiring. The driver opened his door, and Jae-won stepped out onto the sidewalk, adjusting his Tom Ford suit jacket. The autumn air was crisp, carrying with a scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby street vendor. For a moment, the smell triggered a memory. Another autumn, another life. But he dismissed it quickly. The past was past. He pushed open the heavy glass door, and a small chime announced his arrival. The interior of Maison de Lumière was all marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and hushed luxury. Classical music played softly in the background, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and possibility. "Mr. Kim, welcome." A well-dressed manager appeared immediately, bowing deeply. "We're honored by your visit. Please, right this way. We prepared our finest selection in our private viewing room." Jae-won nodded, following the man deeper into the boutique. They passed several glass cases displaying watches and jewelry that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything sparkled under carefully positioned lighting, each piece a small fortune waiting to be claimed. The manager led him to an elegant room at the back, furnished with plush chairs and a mahogany table. "Please make yourself comfortable. Your personal jeweler will be with you momentarily. May I offer you champagne? Perhaps some tea? Coffee. Black." Jae-won replied, settling into one of the chairs. He pulled out his phone, already scrolling through emails. Even this errand was eating into his schedule. He had a board meeting at 3, calls with investors in Singapore and San Francisco, and a dinner with government officials that evening. The life of a CEO left little room for sentiment. The manager bowed again and disappeared, leaving Jae-won alone with his thoughts and the soft strains of Vivaldi. He was reviewing a quarterly report when he heard footsteps approaching. Still focused on his screen, he spoke without looking up. "I need something impressive but tasteful. 3 carats minimum. Excellent cut and clarity. I trust you can recommend." The words died in his throat. He looked up, and the phone nearly slipped from his fingers. Standing in the doorway, wearing the boutique's elegant black uniform with a name tag pinned to her chest, was a woman he never thought he'd see again. A woman whose face had haunted him through 1,000 sleepless nights. A woman he'd loved more than his own life and pushed away with his own hands. Han Soo-jin. For a moment, time seemed to collapse. The sophisticated jeweler's uniform couldn't hide what he knew was beneath. The graceful way she held herself, the curve of her neck, the delicate hands that now held a velvet tray of diamond rings instead of the sketchbooks she used to carry everywhere. Her eyes met his, and he saw the shock register in their dark depths. Her face went pale, and the tray trembled slightly in her hands. Jae-won, she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips, a name she hadn't spoken in 7 years, sent a shock wave through his entire body. The manager appeared behind her, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Ah, excellent. Mr. Kim, this is Mrs. Han, one of our most knowledgeable jewelers. She has an exceptional eye for matching clients with the perfect piece. You're in excellent hands. Mrs. Han, she kept his name, even after everything. Or perhaps, a cynical voice in his head suggested, she'd remarried. Soo-jin recovered first, her expression smoothing into professional courtesy, though her eyes remained guarded. Mr. Kim, she said, her voice steadier now. Welcome to Maison de Lumière. I understand you're looking for an engagement ring. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. Part 2, 7 years ago. To understand the way to that moment, the shock, the pain, the complicated tangle of emotions that passed between them in that elegant room. One must travel back 7 years, to a time when Kim Jae-won and Han Soo-jin were different people living a different life. 7 years ago, Jae-won wasn't a billionaire CEO. He was a struggling entrepreneur sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on instant noodles and ambition, pouring every one and every moment into building his company, Tech Vision, from the ground up. His office was a cramped space above a convenience store in a less fashionable part of Seoul, where the air conditioning barely worked in summer and the heating was insufficient in winter. And Soo-jin? She was an artist working at a small gallery, her paintings displayed in group shows that few people attended, her dreams as big as her bank account was small. She lived in a tiny apartment with a north-facing window that never got quite enough light for her canvases. They'd met at a coffee shop. It was raining, one of those sudden Seoul downpours that caught everyone off guard, and both had run into the nearest shelter, which happened to be a small cafe in Hongdae. They'd reached for the last seat at the same moment, their hands touching on the back of the wooden chair. Sorry, they both said simultaneously, then laughed. Please, Jae-won had said, gesturing to the seat. He was soaked, his cheap suit dripping water onto the floor, his laptop bag clutched protectively to his chest. I can stand. Don't be ridiculous. We can share. Soo-jin had smiled, and that smile had changed everything. The table's big enough for two, isn't it? So they'd shared the table, two strangers huddled over laptops and notebooks, stealing glances at each other between tasks. He'd noticed her fingers, stained with paint. She'd noticed his eyes, burning with intensity that suggested he rarely slept. When the rain finally stopped, Jae-won had worked up the courage to ask, "Can I buy you dinner to thank you for sharing your table?" She tilted her head, considering, "Are you asking me on a date, or is this just gratitude? Can it be both?" Her laugh had been like music. Yes, it can definitely be both. That dinner turned into a second date. The second date turned into a month of seeing each other, whenever their chaotic schedules allowed. The month turned into a year, and somewhere along the way, Jae-won realized that this paint-stained artist with big dreams and a bigger heart had become the center of his universe. They were poor together, but they were happy. Deliriously, impossibly happy. Soo-jin would bring cheap wine and takeout to his office, spreading a blanket on the floor, while he explained his business plans with the kind of passion that made her believe he could actually achieve the impossible. He would sit for hours in her cramped studio, watching her paint, making her laugh when she got too serious, bringing her food when she forgot to eat. "When I make it big," he'd promise her one night, both of them lying on that blanket in his office, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, "I'm going to buy you a studio with windows facing south. So much natural light you'll complain about it, When I have my first successful show, she countered, I'm going to buy you a proper office with working air conditioning and a door that actually closes all the way. When we make it, he corrected, pulling her closer, we'll buy all of it together. They'd gotten married in a simple ceremony at a small venue, with their closest friends as witnesses. No expensive hall, no elaborate catering, no designer dress. Sue Jean wore a simple white dress from a department store, and Jae-won wore the one good suit he owned. The entire wedding cost less than the coffee at the boutique where they now stood, worlds apart. But it had been perfect. For 3 years, they built their lives together. Sue Jean continued painting, taking on part-time work teaching art classes to help pay the bills. Jae-won worked 18-hour days, then 20-hour days, his company slowly, painfully, beginning to gain traction. The problem started so gradually that neither of them noticed at first. Jae-won came home later and later. Then he stopped coming home some nights at all, sleeping at the office when deadlines loomed. Business trips became more frequent. Conversations became shorter, replaced by text messages and missed calls. I'm doing this for us, he'd say whenever Sue Jean tried to talk about it. Just a little longer. Once the company is stable, once we secure the next round of funding, once we land the government contract, then things will be different. But things were never different. There was always another milestone, another crisis, another reason why he couldn't be present. Sue Jean tried to understand. She knew what his company meant to him, knew the pressure he was under. She supported him the way she'd always supported him, bringing food to his office, sending encouraging messages, waiting up for him on the nights he did come home. But inside, she was drowning. Her art suffered. How could she paint when the man she loved was becoming a stranger? How could she create when she was beginning to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake? The worst part was that she could see Tech Vision starting to succeed. The company was growing, attracting attention from investors, landing bigger contracts. Jae-won was on the verge of everything he dreamed of, and she was losing him. The breaking point came on their 4th anniversary. Sue Jean had planned a special dinner. Nothing elaborate. They still couldn't afford to elaborate. But she cooked his favorite dishes, bought a bottle of decent wine, cleaned their apartment until it shone. She'd even finished a painting for him, a view of the cafe where they'd met, rendered in the warm colors of memory. She waited. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. Then 9. At 10:30, her phone finally rang. Sue Jean, I'm so sorry. There's a crisis with the investor meeting tomorrow. I have to finish these presentations. I completely lost track of. It's our anniversary, Jae-won. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. I promise. This weekend, we'll do something special. You said that last month. And the month before that. Sue Jean, please. I know I've been absent, but this is important. If this meeting goes well, everything changes. Everything we've worked for. Everything you've worked for, she corrected, her voice cracking. When did I stop being part of your plans, Jae-won? When did we become just you? That's not fair. I'm doing this for us. For our future. What future? The one where I sit alone in an empty apartment, waiting for a husband who never comes home? That future. The argument had escalated from there, frustration and resentment that had been building for months finally erupting. They both said things they regretted, words that couldn't be taken back. Jae-won had stayed at the office that night, and many nights after. The distance between them grew from a crack to a chasm. They stopped talking about anything real. They stopped touching. They became roommates who occasionally crossed paths, their conversations limited to logistics and necessities. Sue Jean knew she should fight harder, should demand his attention, should force him to choose. But she was tired, so tired. And a part of her, the part she hated to acknowledge, wondered if she'd become an obligation to him. One more thing on his endless to-do list. The final conversation happened on a Tuesday. Jae-won had come home at midnight to find Sue Jean still awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with a cup of cold tea. We need to talk, she'd said. He'd known from her tone that this wasn't going to be like their other arguments. This was different. This was final. I can't do this anymore. Sujin had told him, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I love you. I will probably always love you. But I can't keep being invisible in your life. I can't keep waiting for a version of us that might never exist again. Sujin, please. I know things have been hard, but the company is finally taking off. Another year, maybe 2, and I can delegate more. I can hire people to handle the day-to-day. I can be present again. I can be the husband you deserve. I don't want a husband I deserve in 2 years, J1. I want a husband now. I want someone who comes home, who remembers our anniversary, who looks at me like I'm more than just an afterthought. You're not an afterthought. You're everything. Then act like it. The words came out as almost a shout, and Sujin took a deep breath, steadying herself. But you can you? Your company will always come first. And I understand that, I really do. But I can't build a life on the margins of yours. J1 had wanted to argue, to promise things would change, to beg her to stay. But looking at her face, at the exhaustion, the resignation, the deep sadness in her eyes, he realized something that broke his heart. She was right. He couldn't give her what she needed. Not now, maybe not ever. His company wasn't just his dream anymore. It was hundreds of employees, investors, contracts, obligations. He was on the verge of something massive, something that could change entire industries. Walking away wasn't an option. Scaling back was an option. And asking her to wait indefinitely, to sacrifice her own life and dreams for his ambition, wasn't fair. I'm sorry, he'd said finally, the words inadequate but true. I'm so sorry, Sujin. You deserve better than this. Better than me. She closed her eyes, and more tears had fallen. Don't say that. You're not a bad person, Jiwon. We're just wrong timing, wrong circumstances. Maybe in another life. One where you weren't trying to conquer the world, and I wasn't trying to find my place in it. We could have worked. I love you, he'd said, because it was true, because it had always been true. I know, she whispered. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much. The divorce had been quick and quiet. They had so little to split up, a rented apartment, second-hand furniture, separate bank accounts that were each nearly empty. No lawyers, no fighting, just paperwork and signatures and the death of everything they built together. Jaewon had thrown himself even deeper into his work after that. If he worked hard enough, long enough, maybe he wouldn't have time to feel the gaping hole in his chest where his heart used to be. Maybe he could fill the emptiness with success, with achievement, with the validation of building an empire. And he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Tech vision had exploded. His innovations revolutionized the industry. The money came pouring in, first millions, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. He became a name people knew, a face on magazine covers, a success story that business schools would study. He bought a penthouse, then another. He collected sports cars, wore custom suits, dated beautiful women who were impressed by his wealth and status. But late at night, alone in his sterile luxury, he sometimes found himself thinking about a cramped apartment with bad lighting, cheap wine on a blanket, and paint-stained fingers intertwined with his own. He'd try to find out what happened to Sujin. His pride wouldn't let him reach out directly. But he'd looked. He'd searched for her art shows, her name, any trace of her. But Han Sujin had vanished from the art world, leaving no digital footprint, no forwarding address. He'd told himself it was better that way, that they both moved on, until now. Part 3, the present collision. The silence in the private viewing room stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Sujin stood frozen in the doorway, the tray of diamond rings trembling almost imperceptibly in her hands. Jaewon remained seated, his phone forgotten on the table, his carefully constructed composure cracking at the edges. The manager, still blissfully unaware of the tension, smiled broadly. I'll leave you in Mrs. Han's capable hands. Please, take all the time you need. He bowed once more and retreated, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a thunderclap in the charged atmosphere. Alone. They were alone for the first time in 7 years. Sujin moved first, her professional training overriding the shock. She crossed the room with measured steps and placed a tray gently on the mahogany table. Up close, Jae-won could see the subtle changes in her. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before, a wariness in her expression that was new, a careful control in her movements that spoke of hard-won lessons. She was still beautiful, perhaps even more so than he remembered. The years had refined her, replaced the softness of youth with something more complex, more resilient. "You look well," she said finally, her voice professionally neutral. She remained standing, maintaining distance. "Congratulations on your success. I've seen Tech Vision in the news." The formality of her words felt like a knife. This was what they'd become, polite strangers making small talk. Jae-won stood, unable to remain seated when she was standing. "Soo-jin, He stopped, unsure what to say. What could he say? "I didn't know you worked here." "Why would you?" Her smile was polite, distant. "It's not the kind of place our paths would have crossed otherwise." Our paths, as if they'd been strangers all along, not two people who'd once known each other's bodies, dreams, and fears better than their own. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, grasping for neutral ground. 3 years. She gestured to the table. "Please sit. We should look at the rings. I'm sure you have a busy schedule." He wanted to refuse, to demand they talk about anything other than diamonds and settings and clarity grades. But what right did he have to demand anything from her? He'd given up that right when he'd signed the divorce papers. So he sat. Soo-jin settled into the chair across from him, the table a safe distance between them. She picked up the first ring with practiced ease, holding it up to the light. "This is a 3.2-carat round brilliant diamond, F-color, VVS1 clarity. Platinum setting with micropave details. It's one of our most popular designs for engagement rings." Jae-won barely looked at the ring. He was watching her face instead, searching for traces of the woman he'd known. She'd always had expressive eyes, telegraphing every emotion. But now they were guarded, revealing nothing. "The bride," Soo-jin continued, her tone perfectly professional. "Do you know her preferences? Does she prefer classic styles or something more contemporary? Yellow gold or white metals?" "I don't know," Jae-won admitted. He realized he'd never asked Min-seo about any of this, had never had that conversation. They discussed the timing of the engagement. It made sense for his public image, aligned well with her gallery's upcoming major exhibition, but never the details. Soo-jin's hands paused almost imperceptibly on the ring. "You don't know." "She's not." He struggled for words. "It's complicated." Something flickered across Soo-jin's face. Was it pain? Judgment? But it was gone before he could identify it. "I see. Well, without knowing her preferences, I can show you our most popular styles. This classic round brilliant is timeless, never goes out of fashion." "How have you been?" The question burst out before Jae-won could stop it. "Really, how have you been, Soo-jin?" She set down the ring carefully, buying herself time. "That's not a question you get to ask anymore, Jae-won. I know I don't have the right. But seeing you here, He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized from 1,000 stressful nights. "I looked for you. After, I wanted to know that you were okay." "Did you?" She met his eyes directly for the first time. "Or did you want to know that you hadn't damaged me too badly? That you could check Soo-jin is fine off your list and move on with a clear conscience?" The word stung because they held a grain of truth. "That's not fair, isn't it?" She picked up another ring, using the distraction to avoid his gaze. "This is an emerald cut for carats. Some people find it more sophisticated than the round brilliant. I don't want to talk about rings. But that's why you're here, isn't it? To buy an engagement ring for your fiancé." She looked up at him again, and this time there was something sharp in her expression. "Unless you've changed your mind? Though that would be unlike the Kim Jae-won I knew. Once you decided on an acquisition, you always followed through. Is that what you think this is? An acquisition? Isn't it?" She tilted her head, studying him. "You need a wife, someone appropriate for your position. So you selected one, and now you're here to purchase the necessary symbol. It's very efficient, very you." Jae-won felt anger flare in his chest. You don't know anything about my life now. About me? You're right, Sujin agreed quietly. I don't. And whose fault is that? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken pain. Both of ours, Jaewon said finally. It was both of our faults, Sujin. We broke together. She looked away, her jaw tight. For a moment, he thought she might cry, but when she turned back to him, her eyes were dry, her expression composed. I stopped painting, she said abruptly, after the divorce. I couldn't. The colors felt wrong. Everything I tried to create felt empty. So I stopped. The confession hit Jaewon like a physical blow. Sujin without her art was like birds without sky, like him without his ambition. It was a fundamental part of who she was. Sujin, I'm so sorry. She held up a hand, stopping him. Don't. I didn't tell you to make you feel guilty. I told you because you asked how I've been, and that's part of the answer. I stopped painting. I moved into my parents' place for a while. Figured out what I wanted to do. Eventually, I took some courses in gemology, found I had an eye for it. Applied here, worked my way up. It's a good job. Stable. I'm content. Content. The word was worse than any accusation could have been. Sujin had never wanted to be content. She wanted to burn, to create, to live with intensity. Content was what people settled for when their real dreams died. Are you married? The question came out before he could stop it. The manager called you Mrs. Han. I thought maybe. I kept your name, she said softly. It seemed easier than changing everything back. And no, I'm not married. No one's serious since. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jaewon felt something dangerous stirring in his chest. Relief? Hope? Longing. He pushed it down ruthlessly. He was here to buy an engagement ring for another woman. He had no right to feel anything about Sujin's relationship status. The rings, he said, his voice rough. Show me more options. Sujin's expression shuddered again, back to professional courtesy. Of course. She picked up another ring. This is a cushion cut, 3.5 carats. It has more fire than the emerald cut, more sparkle, but maintains an elegant, vintage feel. They fell into a rhythm after that, Sujin describing each ring with knowledgeable precision, while Jaewon tried to focus on the diamonds instead of the woman holding them. But it was impossible not to notice the way light caught in her hair, the delicate movement of her wrists, the small scar on her left thumb from that time she'd cut herself opening a paint can. This one, he said finally, pointing to an oval diamond in a simple platinum setting. Not because it was special, but because he needed this torture to end. I'll take this one. Sujin examined his choice. It's beautiful. 3.8 carats, E-color, VVS2 clarity. An excellent choice. She pulled out a tablet, beginning to input the information. Ring size. Jaewon realized with uncomfortable clarity they had no idea what size ring Minesio wore. I'll need to find out. Sujin's fingers paused on the tablet. You don't know your fiancé's ring size. She's not my fiancé yet. That's rather the point of the ring. Most people find out ahead of time. Ask friends, family. Check her existing jewelry. I'll find out, Jaewon said, curtly defensive. Sujin saved the information without comment. The ring can be held for 2 weeks while you confirm sizing. After that, I'll need to release it back to inventory, unless you leave a deposit. Should I put it on hold for you? Yes, and I'll take it with me today, have it sized later. That's not how. I'll pay the full amount now, Jaewon interrupted. Whatever it costs to expedite this. Sujin's eyes flashed with something. Annoyance? Disappointment? Of course, Mr. Kim. Money solves everything, doesn't it? The jab landed. That's not what I meant. Thank you for watching. Follow up for part 2.